Welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm Kathleen Walter. With us now on the phone is Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, Republican from Kentucky. And Leader McConnell, it's so good to have you with us today.
Glad to be with you.
The IRS categorically stated that the agency's targeting of conservative groups was a low-level field office operation that did not involve higher-ups. But yet the Washington Post reported yesterday that IRS officials in D.C. were involved in targeting conservatives. Do you believe the Washington Post story is correct and that high-ranking IRS officials were involved out of Washington?
I don't think we know yet, but what we're going to have is a lengthy and complete investigation in the House of Representatives, and Democrats in the Senate are running away from the IRS so rapidly they may even participate in a balanced and thorough investigation here in the Senate as well. We'll find out the answers to all these questions. It may take a while, but the finger-pointing stage is going on now. Everybody's pointing the finger at someone else. Mm-hmm. But the truth always comes out, and it'll come out here as well. What I do think it's important to note is this is not the first example of this. I made a speech in June of 2012, almost a year ago, pointing out the various agencies that have been flirting with the same kind of speech suppression. Number one, the Department of Health and Human Services. In fact, during the Obamacare debate, she sent out a directive to the health insurance companies telling them they couldn't send a letter to their policyholders giving them their impression of the impact of Obamacare on premiums. Mm-hmm. Now the same Secretary of Health and Human Services is shaking down those companies for contributions to a fund which will apparently pay for ads to be beamed at the American people, trying to convince them that they should like Obamacare. Mm-hmm. There have been moves made over at the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Federal Communications Commission, to try to make it difficult for people to speak freely and criticize the administration. So this is just the most recent example, but now they've messed with an agency that everybody understands. Everybody knows about the IRS. It couldn't be an agency more powerful than the IRS, an agency that has the power to destroy your life. And so look, I don't know who all was involved in this, but it's also interesting to note that the Inspector General's report reveals that the IRS did give information to a group called ProPublica, a left-wing group, 12 days after they asked for it, confidential information on conservative groups. So look, we know they were right in the middle of the campaign. How many of them, how high up it goes, we'll find out. We'll investigate this as long as it takes to get the truth.
And President Obama last night called the Inspector General's report intolerable and inexcusable. He's pushed back from claims that there was a cover-up surrounding the political targeting by the IRS. Do you believe the president when he insists that he and the White House were not involved in the IRS activities?
Well, we're going to find out. Mm-hmm. That's why we're going to have investigations here in Congress to find out who knew what and when, who ordered this, who all was involved in it. This is completely unacceptable in our free society. I mean, now we know they probably targeted Billy Graham's organization. There are a number of other conservative donors coming forward now saying that they had inexplicably audits all of a sudden of their tax returns. This could be widespread, and we're going to find out exactly what happened. This investigation, as I said, will go on as long as it takes to get the truth.
Leader McConnell, if it's proven that the president or the White House knew or authorized the IRS abuses, in your view, is this an impeachable offense?
Well, look, I think we need to find out what the facts are first. Mm-hmm. It is noteworthy that one of the issues that arose in the charges against President Nixon was misuse of the IRS. So we know politicizing the IRS is a serious offense. Let's first find out exactly who did that.
Some are calling for the resignation of the current acting IRS Commissioner, Stephen Miller. In your view, should he resign?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I suggested that a couple of days ago. But look, that's a small step. That's throwing somebody overboard. They probably deserve to be thrown overboard. But the most important thing will be the investigations to get at the truth, find out exactly who did what and when, who knew what and when.
Mm-hmm. Leader McConnell, you yourself have been a victim of similar tactics when your campaign headquarters in Kentucky were bugged, allegedly by a group called Progress Kentucky. According to media reports, the organization's director visited the White House only days before attacking you on Twitter. Do you believe the White House was somehow involved in the bugging of your office?
Well, gosh, I don't know. What we do know is the office was bugged. We know there's an FBI investigation underway. We don't know if charges will be brought, but I guess we'll find out soon. And we do know that one of the perpetrators of this criminal act was in a meeting in the White House back in December. So, again, the effort will be made by all of us to get to the truth, and we'll find out what actually happened.
Considering the IRS scandal, can the IRS be trusted to implement Obamacare?
I don't think so. I don't think we ought to have Obamacare. We ought to pull it out root and branch if we possibly can. And certainly the IRS part of administering Obamacare, particularly in the wake of this IRS scandal with regard to suppressing the views of Americans who are critical of the IRS, raises further suspicions about their involvement in the administration of Obamacare.
Mm-hmm. And you touched on this earlier in the interview. The Washington Post reported last weekend that Health and Human Services Secretary Kathleen Sebelius was soliciting private donations to help implement Obamacare. In your view, is this ethical and legal?
I don't know whether it's legal. It's certainly not ethical. I don't think the secretary, any cabinet secretary, ought to be shaking down people in the private sector for funds that the administration is going to use to try to advertise in a way that makes the administration look good. In this case, try to convince people that the deeply unpopular Obamacare is something they ought to like.
Mm-hmm. Leader McConnell, last question for you. In our past interviews, you've been critical of the Obama administration for what you've described as its Nixonian-type tactics. Is this still a concern of yours?
It is. I mean, misuse of the IRS is a big, big deal. This is going to be a lengthy and detailed investigation, completely unacceptable to the American people, reminiscent of some of the abuses in the Nixon administration. We intend to get to the bottom of this. The truth will come out.
Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.